Does it matter if you come from a family that's had a lot of difficulty in its past? Do you think that there's some possibility that you can do well if other people in your family have not done well in the past? Here's another question. What does it mean in the Bible where God said, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the third and fourth generation? Does that mean that we're doomed? Does it mean if someone did something well in our family that we can also consider that we have done something well and that we are worthy in some way because of their success? Family patterns across generations are important to talk about, and that's what we're going to consider today on This Life.
Today on This Life, we're talking about generation to generation family patterns. Ladies, I have 5 hot facts to share with you.
Are they going to shock us?
Wow, let's hear them.
They might. Families across generations develop patterns of behaving and responding to stress in ways that prevent healthy development.
Well, that's a mouthful.
Does it mean healthy development of the next generation?
Yes,
or
is affected based on the patterns that they've had before. Inherited family patterns, aka baggage, affects you and influences your every movement, whether you believe it or not.
Oh, great.
Oh.
So if our parents had baggage, we get,
That sounds like predestination to me, but we'll get to that, I
All
suppose.
right. One of the most productive routes to changing negative family patterns is to do your own work.
Well, amen to
Are
that.
there positive family patterns?
Yes, but I don't think I have any today. Family members are most isolated today because of individualized entertainment. You know, we're in the I generation, iPod, iTunes, and even though we have Twitter, and even though we have the social networks, you know, such as Facebook,
we do them by ourselves.
we do them by ourselves. And the last one, prolonged periods of tension in families cause family issues to surface.
Prolonged tension.
So those are my 5 facts about family patterns today. I guess they weren't that
Each
hot.
one very cheerful.
Yeah. Fact number 6, good patterns
Pause a moment.
All right, I have a story here that we can talk about. Delia is one of 3 sisters who grew up in a family that was completely dependent and enmeshed with each other. Does that make sense?
What
so
does
far?
enmeshed mean?
That means they're like glue.
Okay, stuck
They
together.
stuck together. So we have 3 girls. They have parents, and these 3 girls and their parents are all stuck together. They make decisions
Emotionally,
together,
okay.
emotionally, yeah. They make decisions. They try to figure out what the other one thinks, that kind of thing. Nobody ever said while they were growing up, nobody ever said what they really thought. But instead, they tried to say whatever would make the others in the family happy. Have you ever seen this?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
But now Delia is married to Jackson and has been for 10 years. She has tried in every way to make him happy, along with her 2 children. She says that she feels invisible because nobody really cares about her. She feels deeply sad without knowing exactly why, and said it is difficult to break the pattern of wanting to please everybody. She wants to get a divorce. Wow. So she's not just sad, she's ready to jump ship. She wants to get a divorce, but she's not able to tell Jackson how unhappy she is.
Of course, because she doesn't have experience doing that, does she?
Right, because she's supposed to feel like everybody else feels, and she probably thinks Jackson is happy.
So that's really interesting how one generation is paralleling the previous one.
Right.
That
That's
even though she has a real desire to connect in a different way with her husband, it doesn't sound like it's happening. And she doesn't have experience. I think that's the reason why it's important to look back at the family that we come from and see what are the areas that we learn experience and where are the areas that we don't get that first-hand experience.
And what struck me also was her solution is divorce. She's unhappy because she's not her needs aren't being met because she's not expressing what her needs are, so let's get a divorce. If she doesn't begin to do the work, she may remarry again and repeat the exact same pattern of behavior.
Right. And that's the thing that's so hard to really believe. You know, we all think whenever we leave home, whatever age that is, that we're going to leave the family behind, take the good things and leave the uncomfortable things back there, but we carry them right here.
Absolutely.
In our heads and our hearts.
That reminds me of a statement that a family therapist theorist said in the beginning of our field, and he said, when two people go off to get married, it's not two people, it's really two people plus their parents.
Plus their parents.
Which is kind of an ominous thought.
Well, I would say their parents and their cousins and their grandparents, everybody.
It could be a lot.
It's not just me that I bring, it's us.
Right, right.
Yes.
But you know, you say ominous. Did you say ominous? Or you said
one of us
said ominous.
It's ominous, but the positive patterns come with you too. You know, like in my family, everybody for generations have been really hard workers, and we don't ask if the work should be done. We just do it, and it's a pattern that's passed on. So it's ominous in that its power. You know, its power is ominous. Yeah, but
it's interesting. Sometimes if you mention somebody from a family, you think, oh, that person must be really creative or really talented, and indeed, some of those strengths do run in families where. You get a certain group of people together that are related. You know they're going to have a whole lot of fun and lightheartedness because they're funny people, or they do a lot of music, or they do something together that's
well, let's get back to Delia and Jackson.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. They're such a sorry situation.
We couldn't help but move on. I think I would say to Delia to start doing some reflecting. I mean, I think she already, I don't know if she's made the connection between her own family of origin and what's going on in her relationship and how deeply it runs.
That's true.
You know, because almost in hearing you read it, I thought to myself, she's pleasing her children, she's pleasing her husband. Who's pleasing Delia?
Well, and that's probably the question she's asking.
Well, and this gets to something that you said earlier, Dilys, and that was she needs to do her own work. But what is that? Because people say, well, I've dealt with this or I've done my own work, but what kind of work would you consider that she needs to do so that she can figure out how to state what she needs and how to
not be invisible,
and how to get the things that she needs to do?
Carla?
And not be a pleaser.
Well, I'm going to say I'm going to throw something weird out so you all can
well, there's a real surprise.
I would say don't start here.
Oh, where then?
Well, let me say why not here? Because this is difficult.
Well, the stakes are pretty high.
The stakes are high. And when she first starts talking, really quick on the heels of that first sentence is going to be, I just want out. She says she feels invisible, she's been thinking divorce, and I don't think she'll be able to start here. She's too far down the road. I'd say one place to start might be with a friend or a family member, her father perhaps, her mother, because if she can work on the pattern, you know, with a parent, it will affect her relationship with Jackson.
Now, when you say work on the pattern, you mean the whole pattern of people pleasing?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So she should go ahead and get a divorce.
No.
Well, that's what I was hearing, that she should go ahead and start working on something else, but go ahead and have the...
No.
So talk about that.
I'm saying if she's talking with her family on the phone, let's say.
Okay.
And she finds herself doing the same thing with her mom or dad. Let's say her mom says, well, you know, we want to have Christmas at home, and Delia says, okay. She should stop right there and say, you know what, Mom? To be honest with you, I really don't want to come home this year. And she has to go through that, what? And deal with being visible to those people, because the stakes aren't as high.
Right, I see. But she should still try to move on and improve her relationship.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
In
I just want to clarify this.
In small ways, but trying here is
no,
difficult.
the stakes are high.
And
there.
you know, you said talk to a friend. That's why I wanted to make sure I clarify what you were talking about when you talk to a friend, because I don't know that she knows how much her family does play into this. It does take some time to talk to someone and have them just kind of talk to you about the patterns. Look at your patterns of behavior. Look at how you've been acting.
I actually meant practice with a friend.
Like, okay.
Once I did this with a friend, I said, look, I want to practice being more honest. Can you practice with me? I think the friend became sad that she agreed. But it was wonderful I actually did that with my sister. Say, could we practice being honest?
That's really courageous.
Yeah.
That's really hard, too.
It is.
It was extremely, because she readily said yes. Oh, yes. And then when we started doing it, and she started doing it back, you know, it was, even in that relationship, it was difficult, even though we had agreed.
So we're saying to Delia to start putting up the boundaries with other people, practice with a friend or even with a family member. In the meantime, in her own marriage relationship, maybe she also needs to begin taking small steps there. Because as you rightly asked us, so we're saying she should get a divorce? No, because sometimes you focus so much on the problem that you don't even see that the solution is there by just beginning to empower yourself and start saying no to things and asking for what you want. For instance, I would say to Delia, you know, I don't know how old her children are, but take some time for yourself. Go out. You know, say dinner's on the stove and the house is clean. And
well, you know, I'm starting to react to this because we're making a huge assumption that her husband is mean somehow.
Oh.
No.
Well, I was.
Okay.
Let me just own this. I was. I thought, ooh, poor man.
Oh,
Okay.
Jackson seemed mean. Okay.
Okay. So I think people treat us the way we teach them to treat us.
Yes.
And if she comes from a situation where she's learned to behave in a certain way, maybe she will just take that to every relationship, and therefore she's not asserting herself in a way that's healthy and that is appropriate for her, even if she's shy or if she's from a culture where you don't really assert yourself so much. There are ways to do that that are culturally and socially appropriate. And so sometimes we do things because it's us and we don't really know how to be different because we don't have the experience being different. And I think that's part of the power of looking back at how our personalities are molded.
Absolutely.
And they come from such formative relationships.
Absolutely.
And we don't need to be captive to that all the time.
Well,
sometimes it's just a matter of saying, do I want to keep doing this? Isn't there a different way to do this?
No, I don't know who should be credited with the following statement, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Oh, yes.
Oh, sure.
You know, so I don't know who gets credit.
Say it again.
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Boy, that's for sure.
I'm not sure who gets that quote, but it is when in a situation of family patterns of behavior, you're doing the same thing. You get the same result.
But it's what you know how to do.
Sure.
And she probably doesn't know why she is blaming Jackson because she's invisible.
Sure.
But the really sad part is she is causing Jackson to be a way that he might not even want to be or would be if left to himself.
That's right.
But she's got this pattern going and he's responding to it, and she'll turn around and blame him, hate him, leave him, have an affair on him, and he won't have a clue why.
And we're talking about that reciprocality that often comes through from one generation to another, where someone is overcompensating for what someone is not able to do, or someone has a secret story about what's really going on and the other one's clueless.
That's right.
And it happens down over the generations.
And I bet Jackson has more than once said to her, I am not your father.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's true.
But he's turning into her father because she's used to
because
it.
that's the way that she's portraying herself.
It's familiar to her.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, that was a powerful statement you made about the road, the slippery slope you go on when you don't own why you behave the way you behave, because it's so much easier to blame the other person. You know, it's almost like I think about the text I think in Matthew where Jesus says, you know, you can see the mote in somebody, the speck in somebody else's eye, but you have a beam in your own and you can't see it because you're focusing on the wrong thing, and you will then make excuses for why you do things that are dishonorable.
Well, and I maybe even not that you're focusing on the wrong thing, you can't see the moat. And that's the weird part. You really can't see it. All you know, all she knows is she's hurting and doesn't know how to fix it. So.
That's really tough. Well, we have some email questions.
All right.
We've got four good ones here. I've noticed that my father is pretty remote and withdrawn when my children, which are his grandchildren, are visiting. My kids want to spend more time with him because he's a very nice man. But he holds them off at arm's length and seems to flee to the garage to work rather than to play with them. Why does this happen?
Because I don't think Grandpa has ever had a reason to be that emotional. I'd be curious as to what her relationship was like with him growing up.
Well, I'm wondering that too. I'm wondering if it could be something as simple as that he's wearing a hearing aid and the screaming or yelling of kids makes it reverberate and hurts his head, or, you know, that's always a possibility with hearing aids.
Well, the issue is she doesn't know, does she?
Okay,
She just doesn't know. And that's the thing that is so, the patterns in family is we see things and we make assumptions based on the patterns. You know, if our fathers in the past have acted like that, it must mean this.
Right.
Or
so we pathologize.
That's a big word, but
right.
we make it look like it's
sick.
Sick. So what would she say? Is it a she?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, well, it doesn't say, but let's say it's a she. The mother. What would she need to do?
I think she needs to just say, Dad, I noticed that when you come home, are you Dad? I noticed that when the kids come home, that you often, I often find you in the garage. I'm wondering if you would like to spend more time with them. It seems like they really, really enjoy your company.
Well, don't make me feel guilty. I was just trying to get away.
I'm not accusing you. I'm just observing something, and I'm wondering what we can do, because the kids really, I think, would like to spend more time with you.
Okay, I'll come out of the garage, but I was just getting away for a few minutes.
Okay.
That's so kind.
That's very kind.
That's very kind.
That's very kind. I don't think that always happens that way.
No, because what I thought of, another response would be, well, I like them, but I don't want to spend time with them.
And some people don't like kids.
She knows, though. It's really not. I guess I don't have the feeling you're trying to change me. You're trying to understand why I'm in the garage. So let's say I respond with a more negative, like, I can't take the kids. They're driving me crazy.
What about them drives you crazy? Are they too noisy or too active?
They're just kids, and I need some space.
You just need some space. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that gives me something I could work with then in terms of timing, of how much time, and having focused activities with a lot of respite.
But how does this, let's talk about how this question relates to the family pattern idea. Well,
I think we mentioned that we sometimes assume incorrectly that it must be some family trend across generations. It might or it might not be.
Well, I think of a conversation I had with someone this weekend about family patterns, and a situation where someone had done something, and instead of affirming, the person responded was immediately pointing out the flaws. And I remember making the statement to the person. I said, you know, you're going to be a husband and father soon. You might want to rethink the way that you approach situations like this. And he said, that's not how I was raised. My father never did that.
Yeah.
And I said, but your children are not going to be with your daddy. They're going to be with you.
Yeah.
Is that something? Because one of the things to think about was, okay, so my father didn't do it. So the next question is, but did that work for you? Because your children
some people
aren't
will
you.
say, oh, it's fine. I came out fine.
That's right.
I came out fine. I didn't get it. They get much more than I do. And there's this little resentful edge about it. They have much more than I do, so they should be fine with this little bit. And I think that ties into the generation, don't you?
Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And I think that where we ended in the conversation was just a sense of, you don't know who your children will be. Because you don't. You know, you're marrying someone else, and we're bringing our families into the situation. There's no guarantee that your child is going to be you.
But let's go back. I mean, we can talk about what's optimal. You know, your children need something different. But in reality, people still get to choose. So if Grandpa wants to go into the garage and he doesn't want to fulfill the need that the kids have for him to be with him, he gets that choice. And I think that's what we sometimes just can't handle, is that in the end we have to honor the choices even if they're hurtful.
And say that's the kind of person Grandpa is. He's more by himself. He enjoys being by himself more. And so what we're going to do instead is we're going to go down to the lake and we're going to make our own activities with someone else.
I know we have to go to the next one, but that is so sad. So I'm just had to say
It is. We don't get everything we want in this life.
We don't get everything. And the other thing is it honors, we're all different personality types, you know, and you may be with someone who's just more introverted, and introverts need more space, and extroverts don't get that. So, you know,
well, that's a good point. Well, here's a second one. My son just married a woman whose parents are divorced. His parents have been married for 34 years. What is the chance that they will get a divorce since one set of parents are still married? Incidentally, there are no long-term marriages in my entire extended family.
Well, that's interesting. When I see couples like premaritally, we will just make predictions based on what the past is. So we'll look at, so if we were doing this, we would look on one side, oh, divorce, 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 and no divorce. But the prediction would be down here that they have a chance of divorce because it's in the family, and the young couple will hate it. Well, no, we don't have a chance of divorce because we're choosing something differently. But patterns are predictive, whether we like them or not.
So yeah, actually studies might indicate that there would be more likelihood of getting a divorce. However, there are also other extenuating circumstances that can prevent the divorce.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I think the last thing Carla said about choice, because I think of my own our family situation. When we went to counseling, my husband's father and parents divorced, my side divorced, and they were like, "Well, what's divorce?" We were like, "Not an option." Now we're 13 years in. Oh, we got to work on it. Amen. Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Yeah, but there's a skill set that has to be gained, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Because it's not osmosis.
It isn't.
Even for the families that have long-term marriages, that they've stayed married. We haven't talked about the quality of the marriages.
Exactly, and if you have seen when you're anxious, run, when you're anxious, run, when you're anxious, run, it comes into your head, even if you choose not to do it.
There are also some interesting studies on the flip side of this. Don't mean to be the study maven, but there's also this really interesting study by Olson out of, who does the Prepare Enrich work.
Yes.
And he's pointed out that couples who stay together because they believe that the only thing they have is because of religious reasons they stay together, their quality of relationship suffers. And it's actually less than those who might fight a lot but stay together. So I think that there is a big ditch on either side of this issue.
So you're saying don't stay together just because your religion says you shouldn't part?
I don't say that. I say that what I'm saying is that it takes work no matter where you are on the spectrum.
Yeah, it is. It takes work.
Let's see. Do we have time for one more? I think we do.
Yes, we do.
For several more.
Several more. Oh, okay. Well, I'll just string this out a little then. One man writes, I was sexually abused by my stepmother when I was 13. Now I'm starting professional school and I'm terrified that I might abuse somebody. Since so many offenders were abused, is there any hope for me? And that's a tough one, isn't it? A lot of people that I've worked with will say, well, I was abused. Does that mean I'm going to abuse my kids? Or
well, to answer the first question, is there any hope for me? Yes, because you don't have to repeat the patterns.
No, but I think it takes a lot of courage to admit that a person might have a tendency. I think for that young man to say, this is what happened to me, and I'm at least cognizant of the idea that I could be predisposed to do it to someone else. That takes a big person.
Yeah, I think that when there is abuse that happens, again, there's that skill set and the modeling and different ways of relating that you see, and the secrets that are kept and the attitudes that can come through. And I think it does take some work to get past some of that. And what struck me about this question is that this man says he was abused by his stepmother. And a lot of men won't even be forthcoming to say they were abused by anybody. But by a woman, I think it's especially difficult.
That's what's interesting is when we do genograms on people.
What's a genogram?
A genogram is a family tree where you look at things that are coming down generation after generation. I've been amazed at the amount of things going up through the generations that people that have been patterned and repatterned, repeating over and over and over, and people think that somehow it's just going to escape them, not realizing the power of things like depression, addictions, even things like grief. I've worked with people that they were grieving over something that happened 2 generations before them.
Yes, I have too.
We talk even about groups of people. We talk about generational grief, like in American Indians and groups of people that are grieving over grief being handed down over the generations. So sometimes you carry something, but you don't understand its full weight.
And on the flip side of that, it seems to me, and I've seen this, and maybe you've both seen this too, that when one person is able to overcome the effects of abuse, then they start a new branch of their family that is clean of that. And that while they might have some fear about ever falling into that or their children being harmed, but they have set up a whole new standard for their branch of the family, and the family begins to change.
Now, interestingly enough, one of the things that's important about that is when the change comes, the next generation must be taught the skill sets and must be taught what to do.
Right.
Because there's some things that if it's not set up, it won't be hard for you to go back to what you've seen before.
But the glorious thing is that by the third generation, it may be as natural as breathing. That's the joy. When you look at genograms, and you see that something has changed in a family tree, I love it to look at something and say, what happened there?
What happened in this generation?
Who went through the struggle of changing their patterns positively? Because it doesn't just affect your life, and this just gives me shivers to think of it. It doesn't just affect your life. You're changing all the generations after you, potentially. So
now, I think in the first case that we talked about, someone alluded to the idea of generational curse. I think in your introduction, we're talking about, and God talking about things being visited upon the children to the third and fourth generation. And the curses definitely were ones that went along with them. But the blessings also went along, for generation to generation. So the bottom line is he continuously says, choose today the path that you're going to take, because the choices that you make do not just affect you, they affect your progeny.
The power of a choice is generational.
Right. And the last one, like in 2 seconds here, after watching Grandpa abuse Grandma her whole life, my mother was determined not to marry someone like her own father. But she did twice.
Sure.
How did this happen, and how do I avoid making the same mistake?
Determination is not enough.
No.
In fact, determination almost makes it worse, because you think about the thing you're not going to do, and then you do it.
Because the pattern has to be changed. You have to see something else. You have to reshape it. You have to look at another example of marriage. One of the things for us, it's deciding, okay, we don't want to get divorced. Okay, that sounds really good. But what are you surrounding yourself with?
But if it's not, we're saying determination isn't enough. What is enough?
Well, these are great questions.
Yes. Seems like we're going to have to do a part 2 to this, ladies. Each family has a story that's playing out. And each family's story embodies its hope and its despair. Begin the work today with yourself of solving and breaking some of these family patterns. We have a promise from God that the choices that we make, if we choose Him, He will help us. And not only will we be changed, but our children will be changed. Thank you so much for joining us today on This Life.